Rod Sullivan is a Jacksonville writer who is working on a book entitled Theodore Roosevelt's Bastard Cousin. Yes, that's the title. And he's here to tell us about the role that Jacksonville played in the life of Stephen Crane, the author who wrote Red Badge of Courage, and about Crane's relationship with Roosevelt and his cousin, Roly Fortescue. Now, this is all interesting because Jacksonville plays a role in this history, as you're about to tell us.
Sure. Roly Fortescue was the cousin of Theodore Roosevelt. In other words, he was the bastard, the illegitimate son of Theodore Roosevelt's uncle. And their lives intersect throughout the entire, next 20 years from the Spanish-American War up to the passing of Theodore Roosevelt. And one of the reasons that Roly eventually became a war correspondent was because of people like Stephen Crane. Now, Red Badge of Courage is reported to be the best Civil War novel ever written.
Right.
I mean, it was a bestseller in its time. It immediately ran up to the top of the charts and was a bestseller throughout the rest of Crane's life. Crane only lived 2 years after he went to Cuba. But during that 2 years, he did an awful lot of things. And one of the things he did is he came here to Jacksonville. In Jacksonville, he fell in love with a young prostitute named Cora Taylor. And Cora actually plays a big role in Jacksonville's history because she ran the best houses of ill repute in Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. Now, at this time...
Were they right downtown?
They were in Houston Street. Now, I actually went and had driven up and down Houston Street, and one of the houses of ill repute is where the Salvation Army is right now on the corner of Houston Street and Davis Street, and that was called The Court. But her other major house of ill repute was called Hotel de Dream, and that was up on the corner of Ashley Street and Jefferson Street. You know, at one time, Jacksonville was like New Orleans is today, maybe. They had 60 bordellos on Houston Street. And when people would come into Jacksonville, they would get off the train at the train station, and the trolley car would take them right down this street with 60 different bordellos, dance halls, nightclubs, whatever you might call them. So it was a place to come and sort of let your hair down.
So the temptation was there for all who came to Jacksonville.
It was like Las Vegas. You know, what happens in Jacksonville stays in Jacksonville. So back in this day, Stephen Crane became enamored with Cora Taylor, and Cora Taylor ran this Hotel de Dream where all of these gun runners would beat. And one of them that met there was Roly Fortescue and Stephen Crane. So their lives intersect at this point. Stephen Crane from Jacksonville gets on a tugboat, and it gets into a storm and sinks off of St. Augustine. And for 30 hours, he is stranded in a lifeboat at sea, and he writes his next major short story called The Open Boat, and that becomes a bestseller immediately as well. Wow. Roly Fortescue becomes a filibuster, which is a gun runner, and he goes down to Cuba as well, and his ship is shelled by Spanish ships, and he doesn't actually get ashore, but all of the arms and weapons that he's carrying to Cuba do get ashore. So you have this intersection between Roly Fortescue and Stephen Crane. And by the way, William Randolph Hearst comes in here too. Hearst has got a yacht. He comes into Jacksonville and he holds a meeting here among all these correspondents. Fast forward to a year later, we declare war in the Spanish-American War. Theodore Roosevelt begins his recruitment of Rough Riders, and who is one of the Rough Riders that he recruits? He recruits his bastard cousin, Roly Fortescue. Now, Fortescue's got no military experience at all, but he goes with the Rough Riders. He is at San Juan Hill when Theodore Roosevelt is charging up San Juan Hill. He actually gets shot in the foot, and he gets a promotion, and he gets a battlefield commendation from his cousin, Theodore Roosevelt.
Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
What drove you to write the book? And it's in the process of being written, so it's not yet available.
Right.
And when it is, you'll be here to talk about that. What gave you the interest in this?
Well, first of all, I collect Roosevelt memorabilia, and one of the things that I collected was a wedding album that showed all of the people that went to a wedding attended by Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt in 1904, and that's where I came across Roly's father. Roly's father is the one who had the illegitimate child, Roly. And Roly's story weaves in and out of Theodore's life so many times, it just was compelling. For example, Roly dates Alice Roosevelt, who is Theodore's daughter. Now, what do you think happens when a scallywag, and let's face it, Roly Fortescue is he's a wild guy,
right.
Okay? I mean, he's hanging around houses of ill repute, he's hanging around prostitutes, he's doing a lot of things
He's a bad boy.
Yeah, bad boy, and something that Theodore Roosevelt might not like is his daughter dating. And shortly after he begins dating Alice, he gets sent to the Philippines. So give you an example. And then he's at San Juan Hill. He's a military aide. He boxes with Theodore Roosevelt. And as a matter of fact, Theodore Roosevelt knocks him out, becomes New York Times best-selling news. And so eventually Rowley does something that's so horrific that he gets kicked out of his job as military aide to Theodore Roosevelt and gets exiled to Cuba.
Oh,
But
wow.
his life is just very interesting, and his time here in Jacksonville is very interesting as well.
And there is some lineage to Jacksonville as well, in that the areas, besides what you're talking about with the brothels and so forth, but the gun runners, and that's located downtown as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, people have no idea how much of a role Jacksonville played. First of all, Spain looked at invading Jacksonville because Jacksonville was such a center for gun running. There was a large Cuban-American community. They made cigars here and they exported them from Jacksonville. And the El Modelo cigar factory, which is on the corner of Bay and Clay in Jacksonville, it's still there, was one of the primary areas for assembling guns to go run to Cuba. They installed cannon on St. John's Bluff in order to repel a potential Spanish invasion. And then when the Rough Riders began forming, they came through Jacksonville on their way to Tampa. So yeah, Jacksonville played a big role in that war.
It's great. And you know, for a lot of historians and people that are interested in this, it's great to know that you're writing this book. So we look forward to continuing to hear about it.
Thank you.
And if you have want more information, you can go on profchange.com. Is that what they should do?
Yep, that's right. On Prop Change, they can get a glimpse of what the book looks like, some pictures of Rowley Fortescue and Theodore Roosevelt, and some idea of what the book's going to be about.
Wonderful. All right. Thanks so much, Rod,
Thank
for
you,
coming in
Karen.
today. You bet.